Okay, guys, welcome back to class. Today is week 4, day 5. Okay, I got you already. We're gonna do Kahoot in a little bit as well as a weekly test, but before we do that, we're gonna review. Typically on Fridays we don't have lecture, but I really want to harp on a couple points that we really need to understand. And I think it'd be good for you guys, even though those of you that have done really well. So this is what we built yesterday. It's a magical application that does what? It gets some data from an API and produces some HTML on the screen for the user. There's nothing magical here. It's built using React, and specifically components and props. You guys keep constantly hearing me talk about props and components and state and blah, 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 blah. But let's get back to basics, okay? So let's go ahead and create a Quokka. And we're gonna talk about props. What are they essentially? Remember that a component is a function and a property can be treated as basically as an argument. So let's test this theory. So let's create a function, we call it add, right? It's gonna take a number, well, it's gonna take two numbers, and it's gonna return the numbers added together. If we do console.log on line 6, and then we do add, we call our function add, and we pass it a 1 and a 2, what should we get? 3, right? Then we do the same thing, except we pass it a 10 and a 1, we get an 11. That is because of one thing. It's because it's two different inputs. The first time we call console.log add on line 6, we pass it a 1 and a 2, our function did some magic, and then it produced an output. So on line 6, with the 1 and a 2, it produced a 3. On line 7, with a 10 and a 1, it produced an 11. Okay? So now I want you guys to think about how we can refactor this and make it work. Okay? So what do we need to change on line 6 and 7 to make this work? Someone tell me in detail. Give me detail. Exactly correct. So when we call add, we need to pass it one object. This object needs to have a value key, a key A, which is 1, and a key B, which is 2. And that produces the same output. We'll do it one more time to prove that this is also the same thing. Pass in an object, say A 10, B a 1. That's the exact same output. The reason why I'm showing you this, guys, is because this is exactly what a functional component is doing. Except you don't explicitly put in an object. What do you do inside of React world? How do we manipulate this props object that sit into a component in React world? On line 1, how do we manipulate that? No, how do we change what's inside of props right here on line 1? So let's just say I have my component. So whenever we're in React world, we do A equals a number, for example 1, and B will equal a number, for example 2. These are basically exactly the same. Obviously this is not right here, this is not valid JSX right here, or this is not valid JavaScript on lines 11 through 14, but just know that essentially what we're doing in JavaScript world is when we're passing props, is we're doing something similar to this. At the end of the day, every single property that we pass into a component gets injected into this magical object right here that is the first argument to our component, okay? It's the first argument to that component. I'm trying to show you this right now because we're gonna see a simple example in just a moment, okay? Let's go back to, let's think about paper, rock, scissors, okay? Am I not in the right repository? What? Okay, let me try this again. My bad. Can I do that? Okay, I can't do that. Don't save. Oh, fuck, I fucked up. Fuck. Fuck me. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna do this all over again. Okay, let's think about our app.js for a second. I'm just gonna delete all this magical stuff right here. Oh, actually, let me show you one more important thing. This is actually something else I was thinking about last night. Another important thing about Git, right, is that it's not only sharing code, it's also allowing you to go back in time. Sometimes it lets you go back in time, okay? So right now you guys can see that this is the application that we built yesterday during our lecture, except we did what? We refactored it a little bit. We defined a new component called navbar, and we passed it a function, and then the same thing with movies container. So let's just pretend I want to go back in time, right? So I can do what? Git log. Then I can see, oh, here are all my commits right here. What if I wanted to go back in time to our initial commit? Well, all I gotta do is copy this commit hash right here. It's called commit hash. Do git check out the name of the commit. Oops, I need to add everything before I do that. Update. Please don't do that in the future. So git check out. Don't call your commits update, okay? But I can't think of what I did right now, okay? Because if you guys see a whole bunch of commits and they all say update, you're gonna get confused as shit. You don't know what happened where, okay? So we're gonna git check out. So now you guys can see that I'm on an attached head, which basically means I went back in time. Okay, I'll leave that. So now you guys can see that my app.js, oh shit, it's actually the first commit that I got, okay? I changed my mind. Let's go back, let's go git checkout master. Git checkout master. Okay, let's go forward in time now. So you see how many commits I have right now? I have one commit right now, okay? Because I went backward in time. When I moved back, when I checked out onto a certain commit, it's almost like I went backward in time in my code base. So I'm now gonna git checkout master. Let's go back to our master branch. That's almost like moving forward in time. So now we're back to our head, and you can see that the files will change in our repositories. Think about that. Why does that happen? Why does that happen? Notice how this is app.jsx, and if I do git log, and I go back to initial commit here, I do git checkout. Watch what happens to app.jsx, okay? Git checkout in a specific commit hash, and you guys will see all the files and folders change. So this file was deleted. It wasn't actually deleted, it was just because like in this version of the code base, in this moment in time of the code base, this file does not exist yet. So we delete it, we look at app.js. You guys will see that this is before I refactored everything, okay? So just think of Git as also, it's not only sharing code, it's also allowing you to traverse the history of your code base. Traverse, like just basically go back in time. Think of it that way. Okay, so let's think about what we're doing here. Okay, so I'm just now going to delete everything, or I'm just gonna comment out, and then in a little bit, we'll do more, okay? So just comment out app.js, and now we're gonna define a component called app. This is gonna return a div. It's gonna say my app component. Okay, so now we can just run start, or you can just yarn start or npm start. It's more or less the same. And you guys will see what? My app component, because we deleted everything in there, you know? Okay, so now let's go ahead and define another function. We're gonna call this function my box component. This is going to return a div. This div is going to say my box component. Okay? So now we're going to use this inside of our component, inside of our app component. So you guys will see that JavaScript is complaining on line 119. Why is it complaining? Exactly.
Your whole app must be inside of it.
No, it's because every single function, every single component must return exactly one element, right? So how many elements are we trying to return right now? What are the elements? Okay, so there's two ways to solve this problem. You can just wrap it in a div. That works. You guys will see that the complaint goes away. It goes away, right? But this is, you guys are gonna end up finding a whole bunch of divs everywhere. So there's also a new concept, another concept to learn. It's called a fragment. If you guys can just do an empty. If the div is only wrapping multiple elements so that you can return it, you can just do this syntax right here. Can you guys see this? Okay, it's just like a less than and then greater than. That's all it is. So if you guys need to do that, it's okay to do this technique as well. This is called a React fragment. React fragment. Okay, that's what it's used for, right there. So anyway, we're gonna delete this.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Like strange.
It's like, yeah, this is the only place you're gonna see the syntax. It's called a fragment. Okay, so so now let me go ahead and add some styles real quick. My bad. We'll do orange. We'll just do box. We'll say height is 500 pixels, width is 500 pixels, margin or border is 5 pixels, solid pink. Okay, now we're gonna add red. BG color is is red. Orange. BG color is orange. Blue. BG color is blue. Okay, so remember, so now let's go ahead and apply this class name to our box. So now you guys can see we have a box right here, right? And the objective is, one of the most important things about React is it allows us to reuse code, okay? We don't want to write the same code over and over. So on line 110, yes, I could just copy this and just paste it right here. But then that would be really stupid because then we have to refactor it in so many different ways, okay? That'd be really, don't do it that way. That's the whole point of React, okay? That's why we like put everything inside of a component so that next time we can just call the component or we can just render it, right? But this works and this is a useful thing, right? But it becomes less useful if we cannot get it to behave differently. That's why on day one when we talked about React, we talked about like, hey, how can we get our components to behave differently, right? Remember our card components? Or remember our choice card components? One of them needed to show this image, one of them needs to show that image. Sometimes they may show the same image, yes, but they do need to show different images. They need to know how to do that, right? So how can we get these components to behave differently? And the answer is props. So we're gonna name it a props, we're gonna call it color. Oops. We're gonna have red, okay? We're gonna have red in this one, okay? So now if we console.log here, props, what's gonna happen, guys? Close. We're gonna have an error. Why do we have an error on line 109? It's undefined, specifically. It's not defined. How can we have this thing called props defined? Say again? What line?
Line 198.
Yes, we need to capture it, okay? We can't ignore it. We need to capture the property. So just know when our components is called, just like that function I showed you guys a second ago, this function add, if I ignore props right here, it's not gonna work. I have to capture it. If we do not capture it, how can this work? It is impossible. It will not work. Okay, think about what's going on here, okay? Why is props here not defined on line 2? Because we haven't captured it, right? We have not captured the props. So we throw in props, now the error goes away. And this is what you guys, I'm seeing you guys do this a lot. So that's why I'm trying to harp on this point right now. You guys keep doing this, okay? If you want to consume the props inside of a component, you need to capture it. Keep talking about that. Did I just delete this? My bad. Sorry guys, I'm getting confused. Okay, so now we can console log our props right here, okay? Because we've successfully captured it on line 108. So we've captured it. Okay, so now if we look at our console log, you look at console, you guys will notice that it's what? It's an object. It will always be an object. It will never ever be anything else. And an object in and of itself is not useful. You need the keys inside the object. Just like when you guys look at the movie, right? When you guys are mapping over your movies list, if you guys ignore the movie, you're wasting your time. I don't know why you even mapped over it. Secondly, you don't need the object by itself. You need the keys inside of them. Actually, you need the values. And those values can be found by looking at its keys. Okay, so that being said, guys, so let's just look at our code right now. On line 121, we pass one prop. On line 122, how many props do we pass? Correct. On line 123, how many props do we pass? None. So let's think about what's going to happen when we look at this. Why do we see this console log produced 3 times? Exactly. We have 3 MyBox components. Each one of these components has a console log in it. It's right there on line 109. So each time one of these components renders to the screen, we'll see one console log with the prop, okay? With props. And every one of them is going to have props. But there's going to be a difference. Can someone tell me what the difference is?
The first one is received as like it's something inside the object. The color being red.
It's received a what?
Key.
A prop. It's received a prop, okay? It's almost like it received an argument. Think of it like an argument, okay? So know that on the first one, we sent in a prop called color. The second one, we sent in exactly 0 props. That's why our object is just an empty object. You don't see any keys right here, right? Okay, so now like the original objective is to get our components to behave differently. So we need to consume these props. So somewhere in this code, you're gonna do props.something. Okay, let's do right here, props.color. So now what's the expectation now? That this first one will have red right here. The text inside this one will have red, the other ones have nothing. Why? Because the other ones have not consumed that prop. They have not used, or they have not received the prop, my bad. They have not received the prop. Okay, you guys decide which props you send in, which props you don't. Okay, so I remember, like, let's think about how we do this now, okay? So, like, that's why we did a really stupid example where rock, paper, scissors. Now we're gonna produce a box, or we're gonna produce a string and pass it into our class name of the div. And we do props.color. Oops. And now you guys will see one box is red, and the other one still maintain the original behavior. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, so just think about our functions, okay? Sorry, I really want you guys to get this, okay? Because this is gonna be a nightmare if we did not get this. It's basically the exact same behavior right here. Okay, this function, it will only, how many arguments does our function take on line 1?
Just one.
Yes. But the reality is we can send in many, many arguments if we wanted. How?
You will increase the number of properties in the sense of, like, you increase, when you pull the sub level of a property, like, there's still props, right? But you can put more props.
The object has a property.
Yeah.
You said the exact right thing, okay? So yes, our add function only takes exactly 1 argument, but the reality is we can inject as much data into this function as we want, because we're just gonna add more keys. We can say class name is Sierra, and then school is Coder School, and country is Vietnam, teacher is Loy. For example. So what I'm trying to tell you is how could we get all of these properties into our box component? Someone please help me, please help me.
So,
What can I do, guys? Please, someone please help me. Let's think about this, guys. I want my box component to have many other values, many other properties. Just like we sent in, like on line 5, right? On line 5, we sit in many different values, right? We sit in many pieces of data. Inside of the component or the function, we only consume 2 of them. But the reality is we can send in as many as we want. And our application will not complain. Our function will not complain. So the same thing is true of our function, our functional components. We want to send in more pops. Can we do that?
Add more props.
How can I do that? Tell me the exact syntax, someone.
Just set the key.
What key?
So class name in this first scenario. Type class name
Yes, thank you.
equals. Open your speech thing. Sierra.
It's that simple. I'm sorry if this sounds so stupid to some of you guys, but I'm telling you, like, I feel like I've watched many of you get confused with what's going on here. So I'm trying to reiterate what's going on here. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, so we can send in many different properties if we want, and we do not have to consume them. We don't. There's no rule that says you have to consume them. Okay, but the reality is every single prop that you send in, you're going to consume. If you do not consume it, why the fuck did you send it in? Right? Okay, so just know. So now we're just gonna copy this. And we'll call this one blue.
So it's fair, like, you just said, why did you send it in? So we do consume, in this movie example, we send a whole massive object with more objects inside to it. Now, we don't consume every single article within that object, we do consume some of it. I understand we still use that bigger thing, so we have to have it there. But
Well, so that's different because we got data from an API. Like they gave us that object, we can't say I only want certain keys. One day when you build an API or you work at a company and one of your team members is responsible for building that API, as a front-end developer, you're kind of allowed to tell him like, hey, I need this object to look like this. Kwa, I need that object to look like this. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, Kwa?
Fine.
When can you do this for me?
Let me see.
Okay, that's what I say to him. And then, yeah, it's literally what you're allowed to say. If you're a front-end developer, that's what you do all day. You just go to your backend and like, hey, I need this object. I need it sorted this way. And if you're a backend developer, your job is just to listen to your front-end. Just be like, just listen and complain. Oh, it doesn't have the keys I need. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's what your job is. So anyway, just know right now, because we sit in a different property red here, a different property blue here, a different property orange here, our components are going to behave differently. I guarantee it. And do we see that behavior? Right? So how is this useful? Well, let's go ahead and delete my stupid ass box components. Let's think about what's going on here. I'm gonna extract out 3 components now, okay? Because I want you guys also very much understand how to refactor your code, okay? And then we're gonna be done with this morning's lecture. Typically on Fridays we don't have lectures. I'm sorry for making you guys listen to the sound of my voice. Okay, so guys, it's the most important thing. I always talk about the most important thing. I'm sorry I keep saying that. Everything's important. If I'm talking to you, it's very important. I don't like talking for no reason. I like talking, but I don't like talking for no reason. Okay? So right now, to me, when I look at this, our application right now, it's what? Line 48 through 106. That's about 60 lines. 58 lines exactly. That's not like a million lines of code. But we're going to go ahead and extract out some code because to me, there is a logical break in our code right now. On line 50 through 80, we're producing a nav bar. Okay? So let's just go ahead and produce a new component. And I'm gonna do this error prone wise, okay? I want you guys to look at this thing called set query. Okay? What is that, guys? It's a function, and it's gonna set something, right? I'm gonna extract this code out, and then we're gonna watch it produce an error, and I'm gonna explain how we fix that error. And we gotta think about what we had just done with our pops, okay? So we're gonna take out this code, cut it, then we go above our functional components, we're gonna find a new function, we're gonna call it nav. I don't know. Do I have something called nav here? Yes, I do. So we're just gonna call it nav, and then we're gonna return all the stuff right here. Okay, so now we've got 2 components inside of our app.js. So now our code right here online inside the body of our app, this becomes cleaner, sorta. But now we produce a new error. What is the error going to be? It's going to be complain about set query. It does not know what set query is. What is set query originally? It's a setter function defined in the body of our app component. Okay? So we have a function in our app component that now needs to what? It needs to be executed within the body of a child component. I'm the parent, I have something. I need my child to have access to it. Okay? So watch it throw the error. It says set query is not defined. But we do have something called set query. We do. Watch. It's right there. It's on line 856. It's right here. It's been defined inside of our app.js component, right? But the problem is that we reference it on line 41 inside of a different component. So how can we fix this? The answer is props. Okay? So we need to inject this into our nav component. So we're going to take this thing, and how can we stick it inside of here? We're going to name a key. I'm going to call it apples. And I'm going to stick that thing in there. Okay, so we're almost there. Okay, we're almost there. Now we need to refactor our nav component. What do we do, guys? We need to capture our props. Yes, yes, yes. We need to capture our props. What else? Props.apples. Good job, Chloe. That's exactly what it is. And we'll see that this continues to work. Now we've fixed that error, okay? So just know that we're constantly passing functions and arrays and all these types of data down to our components. And sometimes we're going to need to pass them up to our parents, okay? Sometimes down, sometimes up. It depends on the situation. You guys are going to see an example in a future exercise where you need to go from child to parent, okay? But right now, don't worry about that one. That's a more advanced technique. Do you have any questions so far?
Can we make the variable current set query be a global variable? Like
So in order to do that, you just define it inside of our app component first. The app.js component is the most important component. Okay, like so that one is where I want you guys to put all your work inside of app.js, okay? Put everything in there. Don't even bother with components right now. Once the file starts getting really, really long, then you guys start thinking about how to extract it out, okay? Okay, so now, so we successfully defined a new component and we didn't break everything. Sweet. So now we're gonna go ahead and see that the rule of thumb is that every single file should only have one component. So now we've got two components in here, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what we need to do. Let's define a file called components, or a folder called components, and we'll define a file called navbar.js. Inside of here, I'm going to do RFC, hit tab, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want to type import React from React. I'm going to jump back to app.js, cut this out, jump over to a navbar, and simply replace it. Now we're going to have a new problem. We have multiple problems now. We see that we're not getting all of the dependencies, right? So we need to import it, guys. I'm sorry for like harping over this. I'm sorry for those of you guys who understand this, but I need to explain. I need to talk about this in more detail. Every single day I go home, I watch my lectures and figure out what we could have done better. That's my job. So anyway, I want you guys to understand what's going on line 1 through 9. On line 1 through 9, we're just basically collecting all the shit we need to do our work. Okay? If I was a mechanic, this is where I get my wrench, I get my bolts, I get my hot air gun, you know? I get all the different tools that I need. And all these components are the tools that we need to produce our React component, right? So now you guys will also see that on line 11 that VS Code is indicating to me like, hey, you defined this function, but you didn't actually do anything with it. What can we do with this? We can export it out for consumption inside of other files. If we do not do this step, we will throw an error when we try to import it. Let's go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to throw this error. I'm going to throw this error on purpose to prove to you guys something, okay? We have to export it. So now we do import navbar from components navbar. We save it. We save it. Watch what happens. It's going to say like, oh shit. It's going to throw some weird error. Oop, my bad. Yeah, it's going to say it's not defined. I did not export it. So now we can jump over to our navbar. And we can write it down here. We can do export default nav. And save it, refresh it. Oops.
Aren't you importing nav button on that?
Well, that's actually one of the main points I was trying to say. Hold on. Export default. The name is wrong. Oh, my bad. It's because this line right here.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So now you guys will see that our complaint goes away. So what is the why is this something called export default right here? Okay? Why is that happening? The reason why we're calling it export default is because when we do export default, that means that we can rename it whatever the hell we want whenever we import it. So watch what we call it right here. We call it nav. Inside of app.js, whenever I import it, I could call it peanuts if I wanted. And then we'll change this. And you'll see that it still works. Okay, so if default is so that we can rename it, what is not default? So let's go ahead and define another component or another function. Say const, say hi, and we'll say that this is a function. It's just a regular function, and then we're going to say console.log hi Sierra. Okay, so now we can just do export. Say hi. Oops. Did I do this wrong? Okay, so now you notice that we're now exporting two things from one file, okay? So we're gonna jump back over here, and what can we do differently here? We can also import that say hello, say hi. And do console.log, say hi. Okay, now it's fucking stupid ass. And now you guys can see that High Sierra works. Okay? So just know that this syntax right here where sometimes we import something, what does React? Look at my syntax that I use right here on line 9 and think about what happens on line 1 right here, right? So what do you think is going on with this React thing? It's the default export. That's 100% right. But additionally, there are other things that that are exported from this file, from this library specifically. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any questions? This is, I would say this is like basic JavaScript right here, guys. Literally, like I've interviewed people myself, and I was just like, hey guys, I just wrote a file, and I said, hey, I gotta export like this, I gotta export like this, whatever like this, right? I got this right here. Make it work. I want to use this inside app.js, and I asked them, please make it work. Import this thing. You have to know how to do this, okay? Because this gets more sophisticated, just like everything else in programming. Okay, there's a lot more rules to this. There are a shit ton more rules to this. This is the simplest example. Okay, so lastly, I'll show you one more thing, okay? So you guys notice that we repeat export a lot, right? Well, what you could also do is just do export, and then say hi, and then do this one, and then do this one. This also works. And then we can do all of these now. So we import all these right here, and now you can see that we can import multiple things and call them whatever you want, and just know that that's the rule. That's literally what's going on line 1. And you guys will now see that we say hi Sierra a couple different times. Okay. Okay, so let's review what we just reviewed. Okay, guys. So we talked about functions, right? We talked about functions. We talked about how can we get functions to get multiple arguments passed in, while at the same time they only receive one argument. Because think about the function add on line 1 through 3. We only sent in one argument, but because this argument was an object, the reality is that we hid a bunch of other data inside of that object. Okay? On line 1, inside of add, we sent in one argument, but this argument was of data type object. this object had many keys, and inside those keys we had a bunch of different data. That is exactly the same thing that is going on inside of our peanuts. Our peanuts right here. Is peanuts a good name? No, but I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna let you guys think about why that's a bad name, okay? And then I want you, and then when I yell at you guys in the future for doing, for naming your things wrong, just know that like it's your fault. And I already told you why you shouldn't do that. Okay, so I'm gonna extract out one more, okay? Just one more for consistency. So now we can realize that, so let's do this one right here. I think this is a good an example of how to do this, okay? So now we're gonna make one more component. I'm so sorry guys, I'm sorry, I forgot to do this part right now. We're gonna make moviecar.js. We're gonna jump up, we're gonna copy this. I don't like doing it this way sometimes because I feel like we end up deleting more code than we actually have to type. Now we're just gonna extract out our code right here for the movie card. Okay, now we're gonna define a function. We're gonna call it movie card. And then it's gonna return all this shit right here. You guys will see some more complaints, so we need to import this. So we just cut this, and then we're gonna paste this to the bottom. And now we see certain complaints go away. So now you guys will see that now the movie thing is not defined. So what can we do? How can we fix this, guys? See how movie's complaining right here? How can we fix this? Yes, 100% right again, Chloe. God damn, I'm impressed. All right, so we're gonna pass in props.movie right here. Okay, very simple. Now we need to export default it. Okay, now we need to import it. So we're gonna say a movie card. Let's call it tomatoes. And we need to fix the import. So it's gonna be from movie card. Tomatoes. Okay, so now whenever we're producing this, whenever we're mapping over our movies, the only thing we want to send in is just basically this. We want to take this movie object and then
put it through the tomatoes.
we want to take this movie object and pass it into our tomatoes component. Okay, and specifically we're just going to pass it into a property called movie, and we're just going to pass that movie. So my hypothesis is that this works correctly, which I expect that it will, that we will have no errors. And we refresh, and we have no errors. Okay, so do you have any questions, guys? Come on, someone ask me a question, please. Everyone complains that I move too fast, but no one ever asks questions. I don't know what to say.
So if you can you go back to the previous page?
Yeah.
This is the right one. You see on the what was your previous one called Peanuts or whatever?
Okay, peanuts, yep.
You pass a function back out on Peanuts by doing the scroll up, you see it?
Yep.
With Peanuts, where the Peanuts?
Right here. You want to see the component, the definition?
Yeah, that. So you pass the functions from line 4.
Yeah.
You say hi, and squeeze.
Yeah.
They are all functions within Peanuts, and now
Yes.
can you call those functions?
Of course, we did it right here.
This page now, yeah. So that's.
We called it on line 11,
So
12.
that's like you take a function from one of your components and put that back available to use.
No. That's how we silo our code. We put one code that's in this one file, and this one file is only gonna hold this one code that does this one thing. And like right now, I'm sorry, that sounds so stupid to say it like that, but just know this happens a lot. We're gonna have all our code that's related to calling APIs in this one file. We're gonna have all our code that's related to sorting all of our data in this one file, and it becomes much easier to mentally understand it and to like, to like just basically go through our shit. Because just imagine, man, like I'm telling you, man, there are gonna be potentially thousands of functions in our app, right? And you're not gonna remember where they're all at. It's impossible. It's fucking impossible. I don't even remember like all my friends on Facebook. Shit, and they're friends on Facebook, man. You're like, well, I don't even remember all their names. Sometimes I want to remember someone's name. I'm like, what is their name on Facebook again? Fuck, what's their name? So I sure as hell I'm not gonna remember a function's name, you know. So just know that what you guys will have, what you're gonna have happen is you're gonna have something called like, you know, it just depends. There's so many different types of functions, okay? I promise you there are many different types of functions that serve different things. The pattern is that you put it inside of a file, call it maybe, I don't know, utilities, right? And you guys notice how that this thing also has its own icon because it's a expected folder, right? Then you have something like, I don't know, authentication.js. And now you have all of your logic related to a user and authenticating them, signing them in, checking their email. Is it valid? Is their password right? You know, etc. Okay, guys. So we've talked about how functional components are exactly like functions. We've talked about how we can grab out data out of a functional component through this magical thing called props. Okay. We've talked about what is props always going to be. What is it always going to be, guys? What is this thing on line 11 always going to be? It's always going to be an object. 100% right, Steven. It can never ever be anything else. But because it is an object, we get a more complicated behavior, but we can do more sophisticated things, okay? We can pass in many, many different pieces of data through this magical object, okay? Lastly, we've talked about extracting. We talked about refactoring our code into components, passing in functions as its properties, and also naming conventions, right? If you create a component that has peanuts, named peanuts, and it has nothing to do with peanuts, I'm going to be kind of upset with you. Same thing with tomatoes, okay? Because this code is like impossible to understand what this does, to be honest with you. I can change movie here. I'll just call it L. That works. This one is almost acceptable. Almost acceptable. Because it is an element. I'll give you that one, but you got to be more explicit than that, man. Like, tell me what, like, I don't know what is going on right here. Like, if we only looked at this thing right here, tomatoes, what the fuck is this doing? I can't read this line on line 49 and understand what's going on. I'm telling you, man, I really don't understand what's going on right here. So remember that slide yesterday inside the presentation where it had Jack Nicholson. You guys remember Jack Nicholson? Who here knows Jack Nicholson? Basically, he was just like, pretend that someone who's going to read your code is a serial killer, okay? Make your code explicit and name it good things. Don't be scared of naming it something super long. Okay, so last time before I break, does anyone have any questions? All right, that's it for me for today. So in your applications, almost every single application, you're gonna have something that's like confidential, right? Something that like you can't share with other people. What is the thing right now that we have that's confidential? We can't share. Yes, we cannot be giving out our API keys, right? An API key can give you the authority to like take money out of a PayPal account, to do all types of stuff in the future when you're dealing with more complicated APIs, right? So to solve this problem, we have a very simple solution. If you guys look inside of your get_ignore here, .get_ignore, this is a special file. Okay, this file is used to define things that you want to ignore, right? You don't want to add them to get. So you guys will see something called .environment local, .environment development local. These all matter for different reasons, okay? So right now, the objective is what? We want to move out our API key outside of our code. Because if we do this, and when we push it to GitHub, it's gonna be publicly available. Okay, you do not share your API keys. So how can we fix this problem? So we're gonna create a new file in our folder. It's at the root of the project. It's called .environment.development. Inside of here, we have to define key value pairs. And they have to start with something called React_app _ something. After this, we can call it whatever we want. We'll call it bananas. And then we paste, okay? We can define as many as we want. Hi, food, bar. Whenever you guys touch this file, you have to restart your server, okay? So right now, I'm gonna jump back over to app.js, and we're gonna be able to access these keys through this magical thing called process. So we're gonna do console.log, Sierra, it's called process.environment.react app what I call it again?
Hi, or food, or
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we'll call it foo right now. We'll just call it foo. Foo. Okay? I save it. I jump back.
you did it lowercase on your food. Does it matter?
That doesn't matter. Okay, did I do it? I forgot, to be honest with you. Okay, it's foo. Okay, so it's called foo over here. Just drag it over here. So this should be lowercase. And you guys will see that when we refresh Sierra environment variable, we save it, we jump back to Chrome. You guys see our environment variable is undefined. The reason why that is your environment variables are only read one time when you start the server. So if you change that file, you have to restart your server. Okay? So we change this file, we restart our server. Now you guys will see in a moment that whenever this console log runs, we'll have that variable. Do we have it? Yeah. So this is how we like safeguard. This is where we hide all our confidential shit. Okay? So now we're gonna delete this, and then we're just gonna stick in the API key. It's always inside this magical object called process, inside of a key called environment, and it has to start with React app. Okay? It cannot be start with anything else. Okay? Okay, that's the main thing here. So now I want you guys to think about let's think about what's going on line 5. Okay, what's going on line 5? We're console logging the return of a call to our function add. Right? This function add takes an object as its argument, and then it compares some keys inside the object. Notice what's going on line 5. On line 5, we only pass it one key called B. But on line 2, we are actually expecting a key called A, right? So that's why sometimes you guys are gonna see errors thrown in your components and in your apps, because you're expecting a value to be there and you didn't pass the proper in. Okay? I know I've watched you guys all do this before, and I'm not complaining. I just want you guys to know that's the problem. Okay? On line 5, we don't pass the our add function a value that it's expecting, and that's why its output is not a number. Right now, this will not throw an error, but in your React application, it will throw a fatal error. Your application will crash. Your application will die if you guys do this, right? That big screen where it's white and it has a whole bunch of red text, that's what's occurring. We haven't passed in the expected arguments. So all we gotta do is pass it in. So in the future, when you guys see a component, when you just extracted out a component, and then like you see some fatal errors, it's like, oh, cannot read something of undefined, it's because you guys didn't pass in the property correctly. Okay? All right, sorry guys. You guys keep going.